In keeping with DISCE's central question of how the creative economies of the future can be both inclusive and sustainable, Work Package 5 aims to better understand what the growth of creative economies consists of and why and how such growth is valuable. The approach we take seeks to move beyond economic growth and GDP and instead refocus on the role of creative economies in enabling human flourishing through growing people's cultural and creative capabilities, their freedoms to recognise and pursue meaningful and valuable projects. This expansion of creative and cultural capabilities is cultural development. Work Package 5's methodology involves the devising and proof of concept of a cultural development index, a new policy framework and tool to be used at local and regional city levels. This index is based on a new survey, the Creative Opportunities Survey, which has been trialled through focus groups held in 3 cities in the Netherlands and the UK. The Cultural Development Index is being designed to provide both an extensive understanding of the current state of people's cultural opportunities and creative opportunities in particular cities, and an overall index, a measure that can be used to compare and contrast for the purposes of ongoing public deliberation. Work Package 5's intended impact on developing inclusive and sustainable creative economies builds on but goes further than existing policy tools and indices. The Work Package's intended impact can be summarised in 3 main areas. First, broadening the scope and remit of cultural policy across the EU, so as to focus on expanding creative opportunities. Specifically, these are people's opportunities to experience, discover and connect, opportunities to enact, to do, to make and create, and people's opportunities to evaluate, valuing work, citizenship and community. Second, deepening cultural policy's commitment to supporting the cultural and creative industries, especially in respect of enabling the opportunities people have to be a part of this sector, whilst also seeing this as playing a vital, pivotal role in promoting human development and flourishing, this being the only truly sustainable way forwards. Thirdly, providing new ways of doing cultural policy, through, for example, the pairing of the Creative Opportunities Survey alongside new approaches for public deliberation and debate, but also calling for greater attention to be given to cultural policy makers' own creative opportunities, their cultural development, in the service of their policy work.
Hello and good afternoon. I hope you can hear me. My name is Nick Wilson and I'm really delighted to join you this afternoon from London. As you've just heard, in keeping with DISCE's central question of how the creative economies of the future can be both inclusive and sustainable, and indeed the aims and recommendations of the work packages you've just been hearing about, Work Package 5's aims are to reshape understanding of what inclusive and sustainable growth consists of, shifting the cultural and creative industries and its policy towards strategic goals of cultural development that encompass both GDP, gross domestic product, and human flourishing. Our starting point is the rather obvious but important observation that what we pay attention to and what policy makers pay attention to matters. You may recognise this photo, I hope you can see it here, of the evergreen ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal a year ago to this month in 2021. Whilst the image reminds us of what we pay attention to or perhaps don't pay attention to matters, it is also usefully directing us to the importance of the concept of opportunity, from the Latin ob portum veniens, coming towards a port. As we'll see shortly, this is particularly a generative idea in this context. So what does cultural policy pay attention to? What does it care about? And what does it want to develop? Well, one important focus, one we've been hearing about today, is the idea of the cultural and creative industries, an industry or a sectoral focus. And in this regard, cultural policy is interested in developing and growing cultural and creative industries, or indeed more inclusive and sustainable cultural and creative industries. A second related focus is that of cultural and creative cities. This is most obviously the focus of the EU's work in respect of the Cultural and Creative Cities Monitor, which describes itself as a novel benchmarking tool designed and developed to monitor and assess the performance of cultural and creative cities in Europe. Here then, cultural policy is focused on developing or growing the cultural vibrancy, the creative economy, and the enabling environment of the city in question. But alternatively, building on the work of Amartya Sen on human development and capability, which looks at growth in a different way, not limited by GDP, but rather through asking, what can each person do or be that they have reason to value, their capability? We would like to propose a new and embracing focus for cultural policy, namely cultural and creative capabilities. Our thinking here takes the view that in order to do or be what a person has reason to value, they need to have the freedom, the capability to recognize what they have reason to value. And this is what we call cultural capability. Recalling our earlier reference to the concept of opportunity, we can also refer to this in terms of our cultural opportunities. Going a little bit further, we're also interested in people's freedoms, their capabilities, their opportunities, not just to recognize what they have reason to value, but to recognize and pursue meaningful and valuable projects. And this we refer to as their creative capability, or indeed their creative opportunities. So extending the metaphor of the ship in the canal, we can think of creative opportunities as being comprised of the following three components or parts, which we refer to here in terms of where we might find them. First, creativity involves the discovery of possibilities or potentials. And this requires our being able to experience and have experiences of the world in all its richness, upstream, as it were. Second, creativity also involves bringing these possibilities or potentials into being. And this is the predominant focus of when we think of creativity in terms of industries or cities. It is the doing, the making, or the enacting of the creative project and associated creative products, goods, and services. We find this midstream, as it were. And third, it's important to highlight that whether or not these discoveries get recognized as valuable by individual, group, community, or at global levels is contingent on a further set of practices and structures and associated with evaluation, with valuing, which takes place downstream, as it were. And this is all about culture. So now the normal or default focus of attention for cultural policy when looking to develop or grow people's cultural and creative opportunities is to look at their creative projects. Here in the midstream, in the circle, you can see here on the slide. And what we're proposing with our alternative perspective is an expansion of interest and attention, first by analogy upstream to opportunities to connect with the natural world, with each other and with ideas and possibilities and futures. And then also downstream to people's opportunities to confer, to take an active part in the processes, the collective processes of deliberation and valuing. You'll notice that earlier we asked the question, what does cultural policy care about? We use the term purposefully, for what we're also pointing to here is a structured practice of care, of noticing, connecting, of taking responsibility to fulfill needs, creating, and of responding to whether and how much these needs are being met, conferring. This process of care is what we call cultural development. So, cultural development entails the expansion of people's creative opportunities within a particular location, region, or city, comprising their opportunities to connect, to create, to confer. In our task of helping policymakers bring about cultural development, we now need to move to the creation of a Cultural Development Index, the CDI. As discussed at length in our literature review, indexes are widely used, particularly to help policymakers make informed decisions through appropriate comparison. They are also important in ensuring that focused attention is given to particular issues and problems. Where are we looking? Arguably, this is very much what lies behind the success of the Human Development Index, for example, bringing a regular reminder to questions of poverty, infant mortality, and education under the broad heading of human development. For Work Package 5's development of a Cultural Development Index, we do indeed hope that similarly, attention will, in this case, be focused on people's creative opportunities. And whilst we are developing a specific index based on a new bespoke creative opportunity survey to be used as a tool in a city context, we also emphasise how the creation of this index provides an opportunity for policymakers to rethink how and who with they discuss and deliberate. And so this is also an exercise in public reason and deliberation. The CDI is comprised of 3 dimensions based on what has been shared with you so far. And these are experiencing, enacting, and evaluating. Experiencing, connecting with others, enacting, creating with others, evaluating, conferring with others. And as you can see in this next graphic, our approach to the Cultural Development Index directly mirrors that of the Human Development Index. It's similarly comprised of 3 dimensions: experiencing, connecting with others, enacting, creating with others, evaluating, conferring with others. It's comprised of a series of indicators, 9 in this case. And these indicators are equivalent to capabilities or opportunities: the opportunity to connect with nature, with each other, with ideas, possibilities, and future. The opportunities to access and manage resources, to acquire and develop knowledge and skills, or to engage in encounters and interactions. And then finally, the opportunities for have one's work valued, for valuing citizenship, for valuing community. And together, these constitute the 3-dimension indexes of experiencing, enacting, and evaluating. I'll now hand over to Jonathan to continue in Brussels.
Thanks very much, Nick. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to illustrate some of these key points about the Cultural Development Index and the difference that it can make through one of our case study locations, which is Chatham in the southeast of England. And then I'll draw some conclusions together. So we conducted both a literature review of the policy connected to the creative economy within Chatham, and we interviewed 30 people across the ecosystem within Chatham. And some of the things that were evident within that literature review were strong resonances between the new approaches to creative economy policy within Medway, which is the area in which Chatham is located, and the DISCE project, new kinds of inclusivity and participation within the creative economy policy process in the area, and also an expanded sense of creative careers across the life cycle, resonant with what Roberta has been describing a few minutes ago, as well as the explicit use of ecological language. So we can see some strong resonances between the ambitions of cultural policy, creative economy policy in this area, and the DISCE approach. But then what our interviews showed was awareness on the part of people within this area that a change is happening in creative economy policy, but that there are question marks about how it can be sustained and extended, and that some of this is to do with connections, new kinds of communications, new kinds of resources to support this inclusive approach to how creative economy policy is developed. So I'm just going to share one quotation to illustrate what we are proposing here by way of the CDI as making an intervention in understanding an ecosystem and a policy process in this way. So I'll just read out this quotation from one interviewee who was asked, do you feel that you have your voice heard within this location? And they said, I'd say for a long time, I'd say no, I wasn't having my voice heard. My voice wasn't because I wasn't connected to the right arts organisations. I wasn't connected to the right groups or the cliques, all the usual suspects, as you call them. I just took a step back. But I recommitted to Medway, the area in which Chatham is located. And I think you could really make this fantastic. But being involved with the cultural partnerships as part of the strategy process, I felt that my voice was being heard. And They go on to say, and the countless meetings, I feel that there is a major change happening, yeah, and how long it will last, I don't know, but yeah. So the key point that I want to draw out here is that we can see in this interview extract several of the capabilities, the 9 types of cultural opportunity that Nick has outlined, interconnected. So the capability to connect with people makes possible the capability of being involved in a strategy process, a policy process. And that in turn makes possible the opportunity to develop new ideas, possibilities and futures. And this comes out in a number of ways across the data. And this is a really key point, that these different capabilities are interdependent, interconnected, and this means that where policy can intervene is much broader within the ecosystem than might be conventionally understood. So I'll just draw together some of our conclusions. What difference does this Cultural Development Index and framework make? Well, what's different about it? The first thing to say is that it's focused around enabling and expanding creative opportunities of individual citizens, not sector level city-wide data. So in that sense, it's really focused on what can people do creatively and culturally. And we have this creative opportunities survey that go directly to the capabilities. It aggregates up from that survey, but it's really concerned about what everyone can do within a location. Secondly, it's framed around a bespoke creative opportunities survey, as I say, but that is combined with public deliberation. In other words, discussing the results of the survey to interpret their meaning and take decisions collectively about how to support the expansion of cultural opportunity, cultural development. Thirdly, it takes an ecological approach. So in other words, all 9 indicators, all 9 types of cultural capability matter, and this is integral to the approach. Fourthly, it looks upstream and downstream to better understand cultural development. So this is an expanded sense of the space of cultural policy and of cultural policy as a practice of care, really paying attention to what people's needs are across the life cycle. And finally, all indexes point. That's what an index does. It points towards something. So this index is pointing both to cultural and creative opportunities that exist, but it's also pointing towards new areas and new approaches for cultural policymakers to pay attention to and intervene within in doing cultural policy. So let's return to the Suez Canal. This is an image of the future enabled by the Cultural Development Index, in which the expanded space of cultural policy frees up the range of interventions that can be made and the range of creative and cultural capabilities that can be exercised. And then just to reiterate the 3 broad areas of impact that Nick described in the video, we hope that the CDI has the potential to broaden the scope and remit of cultural policy, that it has the combined potential not only to do that, but to deepen cultural policy's commitment to the CCIs through expanding the range of capabilities that enable the CCIs at the centre of cultural ecologies to function. And finally, as I've indicated, to provide new ways of doing cultural policy through the development of a cultural development index and the kinds of conversation and deliberation that can take place around it. So thank you very much.